Hello, today I'm going to be doing a wound examination, and so here's the wound that we're going to be working with, and so there's some things I'm going to be looking at, and not just the wound itself, but the outside of it is I want to check for the pulse, see what kind of blood flows to the area. So I'm going to check right here underneath the medial malleolus. I feel a slight pulse, but it's not normal, so I'm going to give it a +1, and then I'm going to check the dorsalis pedis. Alright, I'm going to palpate, feel it. And it's about the same, so I give a +1 for each. And so we got the pulse down. Next thing I want to check, just not in the wound itself, but I also look at the whole extremity, is the temperature. So I want to check the temperature up here, and it seems to be normal. Then I check down below, and it seems like there's a mild warmth there. And so for the pulse and the temperature, I'd also look at that on the other leg as well to see what the differences are, because I would use the other leg as a normative value if there is no wounds over there. So that's something I can utilize. And so another thing I want to look at is any potential signs of infection. So some excessive redness outside of the wound. I can even do something called woofing, stir in the air, so I don't have to have my nose down into the wound itself, and I can actually smell for any potential signs of infection. And so that's some things that we can look at. And so now the wound itself, the presentation. We got on the medial side of the leg, right above the ankle. On the outside, we see this black here is the hemocentrin staining, which is basically just dead red blood cells. And so those are some things that we can look at and seeing what the underlying cause of this wound is, which is kind of looking towards the venous insufficiency. And so as we see the shape on the outside border of the wound bed, or on the border of the wound, it's irregular. And so now that we can actually look at the wound itself, and also, like I said, there's going to be edema probably in this leg with venous insufficiency, so that's something I can look at as well. And now, as we're looking at the wound bed, and we see a lot of redness, beefy red on the wound bed, in which that's a very good sign having redness. That's granulation tissue. I'd say that's probably about 80%. There is some black within the wound bed, and that's kind of scab formations. We call that eschar. And I'd probably give that about a 10%. And there's also some fibrous material on the outside. It's kind of stringy. I could probably pull it with tweezers. It's that kind of material. It's not squishy. That was something that'd slip out of the tweezers. And so that fibrous material, I'll probably give it a 10% as well. And so that's the colors that we have and what they represent with this wound. And also I do the measurements. And so for the measurements, I go from 12 to 6, so from proximal to distal, and then what 12-6 is if the toes are pointed downward. So from 12 to 6, we're going to measure the length, and ideally I'd have a longer Q-tip, but this one will do. Typically they have increment measurements on the side of it, but this will work. The whole length of this is 8 centimeters, and so I'm going to measure the longest part from here, and my cutoff point's right here, so I'm going to hold this position and then see where the cutoff point for this Q-tip here, and then I'm going to measure that with my disposable measuring tape, and I got 4 centimeters, so the 8 plus 4 is going to be 12 centimeters, and my computer's going to sleep, so I'm going to wake it up so I can see the screen of me videoing. And so now we're going to be doing the width, and so now for the width we're going to do from 3 to 9, and the same thing, still going to do the widest part of the wound. And so I'm going to measure directly across, and my cutoff point's right here, and I'm going to measure that. And I got 6.5 centimeters. So the length is 12 centimeters. The width is 6.5 centimeters. And also I'm going to measure the depth. And of course we want to do the deepest part of the wound. So I'm going to measure that there. And we got 1/2 centimeter. And so those are the measurements that we would do for this wound. And also I want to check for this wound is some tunneling. It's not very typical to have tunneling with venous insufficiency, but it's still something we want to look at because it's important that if we don't address some hidden areas where there can be infection or dead tissue, or just bad non-healing tissue. That's something we want to address, with ointments and packing it in to make sure that that is being treated as well. So I'm checking for tunneling, and so uh, also one thing we want to look at is the drainage. And this does have a wet wound bed, but it's not excessive moisture or drainage that's coming out of this wound, which is good because we don't want excessive drainage coming out, because that can cause maceration of the skin and it can easily tear. And so we do want to moisturize wound bed, but not excessive. But this is good of what we got right here. And so that's some things that we want to look at when we are doing wound examination. Thank you.